This session we are going to see how to do what is called as form validation. Form validation is chapter number 7 from Andreas Dormann's Ionic 6 textbook. In chapter 6 you have done what is called user interfaces. I have just made a copy of chapter 6. Right? I've just made a copy of the whole folder of chapter 6. Nothing else. Just copy the whole folder, and then now I have just run it from the command line, which is called Ionic surf. This is what I have done, and this is what you get. So in here, if I go into regions, for example, go into Bond City, choose any one of them, click on options, and if you choose request, here you are going to make some request for some tour. And in here, in the first name, if I write my name as 111, last name is 222, email is 333, it doesn't show me that they are wrong. A name cannot be of numbers. So let's say I want to limit the name, the first name as well as the last name, to be of alphabets, and then there should be minimum of 2 characters, maximum of 30 characters, like this. Plus the email should be in the format of an email. If I want to do this, so we want to do all these things here by doing some validation in the form. That's called form validation. In order to do this, we are going to work on what is called a request page. So let's move into the request page here. So this is the request folder. So basically I am in SRC folder, I am into app folder, then into pages, then into request. So from these request folder, I have just collected these files here, request.page.ts, request.page.html, and request.module.ts. Okay, these are the 3 files I have collected from that folder. Similarly, I have also accessed the book folder, which is here. So this is the book folder, and this is for right. So let's move on and get the code from the book. Chapter 7, okay, 7 SRC app, and then pages, you're going to get the request folder, right. So here also let's open up the 3 files here, right. Let's open up the 3 files. So these are coming from the book again. We have request.page.html, request.page.ts. Let's also open the request.module.ts. Okay, we have done this. Now let us move into request.page.html. So let's compare them. Let's try to see what is that you got to do. To my left is the one we are working on. To my right comes from the book. So if you look at it carefully, both of them have a list item here. So this is a tour, a list item, and then choosing some schedules, choosing some language, you need a bus or not, some contact information. So you will find desired schedule, there is a language, need a bus, contact information, and that's it. Only thing we have added here is to check for some errors when you enter. This is the validation part. So to enable validation in the form, you have to have form group and you say validation form, which is not here. You can see this is not mentioned here. So simply I'm going to copy the book code as it is. So let's paste it here. So what happens if you look at this code, there are few important changes here. Number 1, for each of the entry, first name, last name, and so on, there is some validation element here. This is 1. And then for the email also there is validation. Here we have enabled validation form here. Even though validation form is not declared here, it is mentioned in the TS file. Okay. So this is the validation error for the first name. This is for the second name or the last name. Here we are doing validation for the email. So if I save this right now and go to my code, right, it gives me lots of errors. It's looking for some methods and it says validation form does not exist and so on and so forth. So next step is to check the request.page.ts code. Okay, request.page.ts. This is the request.page.ts from the book, and this is our own code. So if you look at it carefully here, we have added certain extra elements here. Okay, certain extra variables, and we have also defined the validation form, plus we have also brought in the validation prepare form validation, right? And then here is where you will say, and then there is send request. So these things are there from the book code, right? So let me just copy paste it here and then just paste it over here. By the way, in the book code, these things does not exist. There is no initialization. So I've actually changed a little bit on the book code, right? So if I'm going to save this and then go and check on the command line, okay, you will find there are few issues that there is no initialization, okay. There is also a problem with binding with form group from the HTML page, no initialization, and then there is implicit any is missing. So let's go to our code. Let's just initialize them. Let's see what happens. I'm going to just initialize them. For the strings I used null string, and for the boolean I used false. So this is done. And then the next error, it's saying here this one has implicit any. So I'm just putting in implicit any. So once I save this, that error should have gone. And there are only two errors now. One of them, it talks about the validation form has no initialization, or it has not been defined in the constructor. So this is missing, right? So if I go in here to what is called as validation, this is this one here. So if I try to initialize like this, okay, you will get some error. You cannot initialize string to a form group because this is of type form group. You cannot initialize with a string. This is not allowed. So for this, you need to correct it with some other corrections. Let me just show you how to do it. So what you do, you go to the constructor. This is the constructor here, and then you are going to add this dot validation form, which basically refers to this guy, and we are using a form builder to initialize it. So once it is initialized, that error is gone. You have only one single error which says can't bind to form group because it is not a known property. Something is not known to it, right? So what you can do, you can go into request.module.ts, okay? Go into request.module.ts. In here, you are going to add reactive forms module. Reactive forms module also comes from Angular forms, so you just want to add it here. Plus, you also have to import it into the ng module, okay. So let's say we have done this. Let's see what happens right now. It is compiled successfully. So I've just done it, 3 changes. One, I just took the code from the book, and then I have also initialized things here. For the validation form, I have initialized in the constructor, and then I have changed in the send method with an implicit any error here. And then when it comes to the request.module.ts, I have imported the reactive forms module, and I have also added into the imports here. One thing is interesting here, in the HTML code of the book, you will have something like this, right? If you save it, you might get some errors here. It says that object is possibly null. You might get this error multiple times because you are doing these checking here. Whenever you have has error, dirty and touched, if you find that error, just go in and put, a question mark here, so that the object possibly null error will be gone, right? So you might need to do that for all the elements here. Basically, this is done here automatically. Previously, I have done this, so I don't have that error. Otherwise, you will find this error 9 times at least, okay, for the first name, for the last name, as well as for the email. Let's go back to our app. Okay, here you have. Now you click on options. Now you click on request. Right. In the request, I'm going to come here. You see now, initially it says this is a required field. Press one single alphabet, it says must be at least 2 characters. Once I make it 2 characters, the line becomes green and I can keep typing. Okay. So when I type something like number, it becomes red because that is not allowed. Only alphabets and spaces are allowed. So here again I can do, so let's say the email, okay, this is not allowed. So now it needs 2 characters here, see. So it is just looking for an @ symbol, a dot and 2 characters, so it becomes okay. If there is a mistake, it's going to keep on telling you what is the mistake it is. So, this is the whole idea of this code. This is the validation. So, if you go in and open the code which you have written here, this is the request.page.ts, right. So, you can see here we are checking for the validation. Here we are checking for the first name, minimum length is true, 2, which is using validators, maximum length is 30, and you allow A to Z small alphabets, capital alphabets, you can have a space, any number of them, right. And then here it is for the last name, here it's the regular expression for the email. You don't need to understand this, but this is generally we expect them. So, it says 2 comma, so minimum 2 characters should be there, okay, and it can be of only alphabets, there is no numbers allowed here, okay. So, this is the validation we have done, this is just basically the validation, right. Sometimes you might get some other extra errors, for example, you might need to add your reactive forms module in the app.module.ts, okay, this is possible. And then what do you mean by has error? You have seen here that is a function or a method called has error. This basically indicates whether there is error or not, and dirty means whether the user has changed the field or changed the value. Touched means user has clicked it and clicked on somewhere else, right. And then you have the submit buttons there. So, these are few of the things you need to take care of. And if in case there is an error in terms of HTTP client, meaning there is no providers, then you need to go into the respective TS files and import the providers, which is HTTP client and so on. And that is it. This is just a matter of checking form validation.